Right. Thank you, Mandy. And good morning, everybody. Thank you, North Carolina Serials Conference and Mandy, for the opportunity to talk today about the OA Switchboard, a mission-driven solution that thrives on collaboration. My name is Yvonne Campfens. I'm the Executive Director of the foundation that runs the OA Switchboard, which was founded last year after a project led by OASPA. Now, the OA Switchboard is Central Information Exchange Hub, taking charge of multilateral OA publication level arrangements. As a facilitator, an independent intermediary connecting parties and systems, streamlining communication and the neutral exchange of OA-related publication level information, ensuring a financial settlement can be done. And you may think that's nothing new, that's not unique, and my claim is that it is. Not only because it's mission driven and collaborative, I will show you why. So the OA Switchboard is founded by and is for three primary stakeholder groups: funders who want to implement OA policies on a publication level and demonstrate impact of their research funding. It's for research institutions who want publication level delivery on their open access strategies and monitor and manage their OA funds and budgets. And it's for academic publishers who want to reduce administrative complexity around publication level fulfillment of policies and/or agreements and provide easy reporting. So we serve all three stakeholder groups, and all three are contributing to cover the cost of our not-for-profit venture. We have therefore built in collective governance between funders, institutions, and publishers, and we're not-for-profit and aim to keep the fees as low as possible. Neutrality and independence are preserved, and the foundation cannot be acquired by any commercial organization. By nature and law, it's mission-driven and not for profit. And why that is so important is described in a blog we posted on the 4th of March. Not a topic for today's conference, but I hope you find it worthwhile to read about it. Today, I'm talking about OA Switchboard providing shared infrastructure, aiming to set industry standards and opportunities for integration. We aim to complement what is already out there and drive standardization, interoperability, and the use of existing identifiers like DOIs, ORCID IDs, and institutional identifiers like ROR, and connect all parties and systems in the ecosystem, funders, institutions, publishers, and also their service providers, their solution providers. And this is important as an intermediary reduces complexity and administrative burden, while shared infrastructure and standards drive efficiency and cost reduction. We enable structured data exchange via predefined messages, collaboratively defined and meeting de facto, for the time being, industry standards. And as a messaging system, we provide a standard protocol. We're not a database. That's also important. We're committed to open source and open APIs, and by design, open source software licenses promote collaboration and sharing. And open source is also an essential mechanism for building transparency. Community representation, involvement, and input in the development is ensured and formalized, and we are committed to provide means to integrate with other systems. Now, what is the problem we're aiming to solve? Dealing with open access publications where there are multiple authors, affiliated institutions, research funders, business models, policies, mandates, requirements, and agreements involved is complex and administratively burdensome. Funders, institutions, and publishers are faced with a myriad of systems, portals, and processes when dealing with OA publication level arrangements. And this hampers the transition to open access, the realization of policies and agreements, and progress in developing new business models. And from a researcher perspective, this landscape is at best confusing and at worst impenetrable. This illustration should actually be even three-dimensional because funders aren't in, so it's even more complex. And this visual shows the relationships only, not even the transactional information exchanges. So imagine all the traffic over these lines. And this is what the OA Switchboard can do as a facilitator, as a hub, providing a standard messaging protocol that validates messages and routes them to the correct recipient in the way they want to receive them. This reduces complexity, and the more parties connect and systems connect, the simpler it gets. This is how the potential end game would look like. We may never achieve this, but this visual clearly illustrates what an intermediary can do, and that partial adoption, as we saw on the previous slide, is already an improvement to the current situation. The OA Switchboard supports many use cases and can be called upon when needed or integrated in stakeholders' workflows and systems. At the moment, because we only got started last year and we went live 1st of January, we have 2 message types live, and they both initiate from the publisher and can be sent to funders and institutions. The first one is an eligibility inquiry and the response messages, and the second one is a publication payment settlement notification message, and these 2 are relevant for reporting, and I'll talk a bit more about that. We have a development roadmap and have concrete plans for other message types now that we have the infrastructure in place, also initiating from funders and institutions and sent to publishers. In the current launch phase, which is 21-22, we're prioritizing these so-called P1 messages that enable the reporting, uniform reporting. And in that respect, think of the OA Switchboard as the counter code of practice, but then for reporting on OA-related publication level information. And this slide is obviously here with permission from Counter, who saw the analogy as well. Last week, we organized a webinar dedicated to the reporting topic, and the recording is available on our website. In short, the OA Switchboard, when it comes to reporting, is an article-level reporting hub for publishers, libraries, institutions, and funders, and it delivers structured version of record data in JSON and Excel. Through an API, it can feed directly into existing funder and institution and library systems for further integration, processing, and analysis. And it adopts the EZAC standards for reporting recommendations. So basically, through the hub, the recipients get direct alerts, article by article, and aggregated. The standardized reports are available. And the big benefit is that that can be retrieved and fed into systems through one connection across publishers. So in short, standard messaging protocol, automated validation and routing, going through shared infrastructure, connecting and complementing existing systems and building on existing persistent identifiers. We're live, and I'm inviting you to join us. We, with our launch customers, have decided to focus on those 2 specific use cases to collaborate on with priority in 2021. Reporting made easy from publishers to institutions, consortia, and funders. It's for all scenarios, whether there's an agreement in place, yes or no. So read and publish transformative agreements, or single articles being maybe funded out of OA funds. And also for other business models like Diamond or Subscribe to Open, where there's no article level financial information or a transaction relevant. And the other shared priority use case is locating central OA funds and getting publication charges paid in an efficient and cost-effective manner. We're very proud and happy with the support of our launch customers and founding partners, and they're listed in this overview. And I want to thank them all again for taking this journey with us and shaping the OA Switchboard. And if we have time, Mandy, I'd like to run through a couple of quotes of other organizations and people, what they're saying about the OA Switchboard. Earlier this year, we were covered by an outsell analysis, and they concluded the OA Switchboard addresses an acute need in the market and has mission alignment working in its favor. It's not intended to compete, since standardized metadata will eventually benefit everyone. In December 2020, JISC, UKRI, and Wellcome Trust announced their support as some of the first organizations, and we're very grateful for that. The OA Switchboard was also mentioned in the recent OA Journal Diamond study that was published as an opportunity for infrastructure to help with the reporting on the reporting need that also Diamond journals have. And the recently announced deal between the Royal Society and California Digital Library was mentioning the Switchboard as supporting them in delivering on the back office details of that deal. And last but not least, we seek active collaboration with other industry initiatives, strive for interoperability and the use of existing identifiers. And in the last recently, Roar did a great tweet about the switchboard and mentioning how we're an example of leveraging open and shared infrastructure with PIDs. Now, I would like to thank you all for your attention. There's so much more to say, and I invite you to reach out either in the chat or one by one to talk about it. And the title of my talk was How the OA Switchboard is Building the Infrastructure for an OA-driven Scholarly Communication Landscape. Today, I addressed three elements: shared infrastructure, standards, and integration. Being neutral and independent intermediary to drive shared infrastructure, and a standardized messaging protocol to reduce complexity and drive down cost, and doing technology and development collaboratively and open source, enabling integration with existing systems via open APIs. The aim is to reduce complexity and drive down cost, and standardization obviously works best if everybody participates in developing them and adopting them. And we're here for everybody, for the ecosystem to work better, to learn, adjust, and progress. And with that, I thank you for your attention and hope to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Megan?
So, hi everyone. My name is this working? Can you see my screen?
We don't see your slides yet.
Okay, hang on one second. How's that?
You're good now.
Okay, great. So my name is Megan Heady, and I'm the head of acquisitions at West Virginia University Libraries. And today I'm going to give you an overview of our recent project to migrate to a hosted EZproxy service. And there we go. So to give you some context about our university, we're an R1 institution and have an FTE of about 28,000. So in this slide, you can see our 4 library locations in Morgantown. 2 of those include a health sciences library and a law library. And we also have 2 divisional campuses in other areas of the state, as well as another health sciences library on our Charleston campus. So for a little bit of background, we managed our own EZproxy server for over 20 years. It was originally managed by our library IT department and then transferred to technical services when we did a reorganization in 2016. Also in 2016, the management of electronic resources for our different campuses and libraries was centralized to be managed by the eResources unit in Morgantown. So managing these resources can be a bit complicated, as some of them are restricted to certain users or campuses, and we didn't have our proxy server set up in a way to handle different user restrictions. So for example, a number of our law resources are limited to law school users, and they were not included in our proxy server and could only be accessed on campus or with a username and password. So this is something we wanted to address. We evaluated different authentication options, and one of those was hosted EZproxy. So we reviewed the pros and cons of using the hosted service. So some of the advantages were less staff time on maintenance. Stanzas would be updated proactively, so hopefully no more missed communications from vendors. Multiple staff members can submit tickets to OCLC to fix problems, so there wouldn't be a bottleneck on our end if someone was out on vacation or for any reason. And the big thing, we could set up groups for different user types. So our law library, alumni, retirees, and we would also have increased analytics. So we could see where our users were accessing the resources, like which campuses were using which resources. There were some disadvantages. It does cost a little bit more. We do need to wait for OCLC to make updates, and there is less flexibility with the server setup. But overall, we thought the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. So in May 2020, we began planning the project. We used Teams and SharePoint to organize most of the work. And this was also the first big project we worked on in our new remote environment. So June through December was when the bulk of the work was completed. This was when we sent our data to OCLC. We updated our vendors with the new IP address and proxy URL and tested our access. And then I'll describe that work a little bit more in detail. We went live in the middle of December after classes ended. And this was when we changed the proxy URL in our knowledge base, our A to Z list, and our libguides. And then we tested many of those resources again after making that change. We communicated the change out to the university, and we eventually shut down the self-hosted server. So here is a screenshot of the team space we had for interdepartmental work. Units included in this team were the library systems units, the library's e-resources unit, libraries administration, and university ITS. So there were many stakeholders in the project, and not all of them were included here. But using Teams was a great way for us to organize and store the documents that people from different units needed to access, especially since many of us were working from home. And the e-resources unit had a separate team space for coordinating their work and testing resources. So this is a snippet of the spreadsheet the e-resources unit used to manage their work for the migration. So before OCLC had migrated all of our stanzas, e-resources began updating vendors with the new IP address and starting with our most used resources. They first looked to see if they could add it in the admin portal, and if not, they contacted the vendor to update it. Then once OCLC notified us that we had stanzas to test, we dropped the links into the spreadsheet, and a staff member tested it if the IP was updated. If there was an error, the e-resources unit worked with the vendor to correct it or send it to OCLC if it was on their end. This was a longer process than we anticipated. One is just the number of resources we have and the time it can take to make updates. Some are quick and others can just take a little bit longer. Sending the new proxy URL to our vendors also didn't always go as smoothly as we anticipated. Some we could update on the admin portal, and others we did via email. And some vendors, they didn't need it. And so it caused a little bit of confusion and some discussion back and forth as to why we were sending them. We also had staff members out at various times due to our university furlough and family leaves. Plus we were working through budget cuts and renewals. So it was a really busy time to take on this project. But then we went live. After we migrated, we ran into a few problems, but not too many. We discovered a few resources didn't get updated fully before we migrated. And that was mainly due to not having the new proxy URL set up correctly on the vendor platform. And we had to help some users who'd bookmarked resources with the old proxy. And we discovered some resources that were sent through proxy that our unit had never worked with. And so we needed to update those for the people who were using them. And we had to learn how to troubleshoot the new proxy errors with the new system. So identifying if the error was with the resource or with our new user management system. And we still need to create documentation for working through these errors. We haven't done that yet, but we have created new user groups for law, alumni, and retirees. And this is a big improvement. And we're looking to create additional groups as well. So overall, even with a few bumps, we felt it was a successful migration. And so I'll end my talk here. And if I can stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Abigail?
Yes, let me. Are you seeing my slides?
Yeah, we see him.
1 second. Are you just seeing my slides? I'm just trying to use the speaker notes view for the first time. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, we see like the URL bar, but it's mostly just
Okay.
the slides. So
Okay,
it's
perfect. Okay, so thank you so much for having me today. My name is Abigail Sparling. I'm the Serials Metadata Librarian at the University of Alberta Libraries. And today I'm going to be talking about a custom report that we use to identify inaccuracies in our link resolver serial metadata. So the serial metadata landscape is a complex one, and we know that there can be differences between the detail and quality of data produced, say, by PCC catalogers and the data submitted by some vendors to link resolvers. We also know that incorrect serial metadata in our link resolvers can result in the inability of users to access our paid content. So let's take a look at the title history of the National Law School of India Review as an example of what the difference between catalog and link resolver metadata can commonly look like. So this title has two earlier titles, the first of which began in 1989, the second of which began in 2002, and the latest title, the National Law School of India Review, began in 2008. On the left, we have how these title changes are represented in our catalog. And as catalogers, we work hard to ensure that our catalog data accurately reflects serial title histories in accordance with PCC cataloging rules, to enable our users to find and select the correct resources. On the right here, we have how Publisher X has represented this data in our link resolver knowledge base. Publisher X does have the complete title history on their site, but they don't represent that title history accurately. So under the earliest title, the Student Advocate, they have coverage listed from 1988 to current. Under the interim title, the Student Bar Review, they have coverage listed as 1988 to 2007. And under the latest title, there's no coverage provided. This title is not in their collection. And so therefore it compromises access to this title for our users. So the publication difference report, which we call the PubDiff report for short, was created to catch these errors and allow us to do cleanup work. So to create this report, what we do is we pull our link resolver holding data through the SFX API. Our link resolver is SFX, and we compile a cumulative coverage statement for each of the titles we have access to. We compare this coverage statement to the dates in the corresponding MARC record in the catalog to identify differences in those dates, and then we report out any errors in a human readable report that is organized by SFX collection. So breaking this down, this is what it looks like. So the interim title, the Student Bar Review that we just looked at, has two access points in two different vendor collections in our link resolver knowledge base. Our custom coding takes this date information from the SFX API and creates a cumulative coverage statement. So these dates coverages on the left become the cumulative coverage statement 1988 to 2007. The next step takes these coverage statements and compares the start date and the end date against the date 1 and date 2 fields in the corresponding catalog record, using the SFX object ID and the record as a match point. So we have that SFX object ID and the data we pulled from the SFX API to create those cumulative coverage statements, and then we also have them in the corresponding catalog records. If the start date is earlier than date 1 and or the end date is later than date 2, we have an error to report. So these errors are then sorted into a human readable report organized by SFX target. So here we see Publisher X, which we have marked as a priority for cleanup. If you then click into that collection, you see a list of the titles that have date discrepancies between the link resolver and the catalog record. And here we see the Student Bar Review reported as having an SFX start date that's earlier than date 1 in the catalog record. So this report contains all the information we need to review that title, including the SFX object ID in case we need to go in and make changes in SFX and the corresponding catalog record ID. So there are some limitations to what our report can currently do, some of which are based on cataloging rules and others of which are based on the complexity of the data in the link resolver. So one limitation that we run into is when a title starts with a multi-year issue. So when a first issue spans multiple years, concert cataloging rules instruct us to record the later date in the date 1 field, while link resolvers typically take the earlier date. And so this can lead to incorrect titles or incorrect reports of errors. And Embargoes similarly add complexity that we have not been able to account for in our coding thus far. And so anytime an embargo is encountered, it is assigned the value of the current year, which can lead sometimes to titles being flagged as problematic when they are not. There are many ways date ranges can be represented also in the link resolver. And while we've made best efforts to accommodate all those different syntaxes in which the data comes to us through the SFX API, our current programming isn't perfect. Finally, using a cumulative coverage statement representing all vendor access points when comparing against the catalog record is good for identifying errors, but if there are many vendor access points, it doesn't immediately identify those that are problematic. So I want to end by highlighting, though, the advantages of our report. Beyond identifying issues for us to correct, typically in the SFX knowledge base, but sometimes in our catalog records, the report helps us to identify vendors who commonly misrepresent title histories, which allows us to follow up with them to address the wider problem. Because our library is part of a 17 library consortium with a shared ILS, it can also help us to identify issues in cataloging contributed by other members. The design of the final report, which is organized by collection, also allows us to prioritize particular collections for review and cleanup, which can help given the scope of the issues reported in this report. Finally, I do believe that the logic underlying this report might be of use to link resolver vendors and publishers, particularly those who have access to quality mark records, to be able to perform quality control on their collection data in a similar way that we are doing in our local link resolver. So to wrap up on a forward-looking note, I will say that the PubDiff report was or has been a component of our eJournal catalog record update process for many years and serves other purposes I haven't had time to highlight here. However, we are currently transitioning from a custom-built process for eJournal record updates to the SFX market program. And this is allowing us to investigate what the future of the PubDiff report will look like. In particular, I want to investigate how we might update the report to compare each vendor access point for a title to the corresponding catalog record instead of that cumulative coverage statement. This would help us better identify problematic collections and eliminate a step in our cleanup process. So that's all I have for today. I did want to thank the people listed on this slide who originally created the PubDiff report many years ago, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Abigail. Nicole, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Good morning, everybody. Can you see my slideshow?
Yes, we can.
So today I'm going to present on a report feature that has been added to all of our catalog records for monographs and serials. And this was added as a part of an effort to crowdsource our cataloging maintenance because I work at a mid-size university library, but we have a very limited number of cataloging personnel. And so it's sometimes not possible to check every catalog record before we send items into the main collection. So I work at Austin Peay State University. I'm the resource management librarian, which means that I handle cataloging and acquisitions. In the summer of 2020, Austin Peay State University's Woodward Library added a report feature to all catalog records, allowing library users to alert me of any errors discovered while searching, including broken links or incorrect information. With the implementation of the report feature, spot checking efforts were crowdsourced to all library users, and I was able to collect data on the types of errors that appeared most often in catalog records. At Woodward Library, cataloging is primarily handled by 2 library personnel. On average, 1,000 to 3,000 new items are added to the permanent collection per year, and an equivalent number of bibliographic records are created either through copy or original cataloging. Cataloging personnel are also responsible for the ongoing bibliographic maintenance of over 224,000 print books and 449,000 ebooks. Additionally, all authority control is performed in-house. While each bibliographic record for permanent collection print items is reviewed twice before items are sent to the shelves, there is still potential for human oversight. Additionally, ebook record updates are supplied in batch files from vendors, and these are only spot checked. To ensure that accurate and accessible information is provided in the library catalog, a report feature was added to every monograph and serial record in the catalog. Under the location field, catalog users see the phrase, "See an issue, broken URL, report it here." This link takes users to a catalog broken record form. On this form, users can describe the issue and include their name and email address if they want to be notified when the issue is resolved. Once the form is submitted, I receive an email with the description of the problem as well as a link to the record. So far, this feature has predominantly been used by faculty and staff. The demographic breakdown is 80% faculty and staff and 20% students. This may reveal differences in the research habits between faculty and staff and students. Faculty and staff may be more likely to need a specific title and therefore more likely to report a URL issue. Students may be looking for a good enough resource and therefore more likely to move on to another search result when they run into an access barrier. Data is also being recorded for the types of issues identified. 40% of issues reported were for missing item records. This was often the result of separate bibliographic records being created for item and order records. An additional 40% of issues reported were for broken URLs, and the final 20% of issues reported were for missing bibliographic information. The catalog error report led to quick responses as well as one long-term workflow change. Quick fixes include bibliographic corrections, such as adding subfields and additional authors, or merging duplicate bibliographic records. Quick fixes also included educational opportunities. In some instances, students were simply confused about the difference between bibliographic records for print books and e-resources, and sometimes they needed help accessing ebooks or serials from off-campus. These results confirmed the need for basic catalog record instruction in early information literacy sessions. The report feature also revealed several bibliographic records that were not properly deleted after an EBA program. This occurred when the EBA programs contained ebooks that were already owned by the library. In these instances, EBA records were merged with already existing library ebook records and were therefore unable to be identified during the original delete process. 2 workflow changes were implemented to prevent this from happening in the future. The first change was the addition of unique prefixes in the 001 field for future EBA programs using MarcEdit. And the second change was the creation of a JSON query to identify records from EBA programs by the 001 bibliographic utility number rather than the 830 series statement. I will briefly show you what the JSON query looks like. This process was performed in Notepad++ and in Sierra's ILS, and it was inspired by Stacy Wolf's article titled "Automating Authority Control Processes," which appeared in the 47th issue of Code for Lib. The first step is to copy the EBA collections control numbers into Notepad++ and perform the following find replace actions as shown on the screen. I know that it's hard to see the screenshot, so I added the find replace expressions in larger fonts. And I'm going to move through this quickly, but if anyone wants the written instructions for this process, I'm happy to send those out via email. Once the find replace results have been produced, you have to add this queries prefix and suffix to get the formatting results to be readable in Sierra. And once you have that query created, simply copy and paste the text into the JSON query option in Sierra's create list. Store the record type as bibliographic. And once you have your search results, remove any purchased content from the results list and then perform a batch delete of all records in the review file. If you are new to JSON, Sierra can help you craft the language needed to draft the find replace code. All you have to do is create a search in Sierra's classic search function and then click the JSON tab to get an idea of what the beginning of the find replace string will look like. You don't have to include every single search item that you're looking for in this sample query. You just need to create the criteria around the search and find and replace that you want to perform. So that was a bit of a tangent, but in summary, the benefits of the report feature included student assistance. In a time when we are limiting face-to-face interaction and reference, this provided a point of contact for students to report problems or issues from within the library catalog. Additionally, as stated earlier, currently 2 library personnel are responsible for the ongoing maintenance of nearly 700,000 catalog records, including nearly 450,000 ebook records, which are updated weekly by vendors. The report feature has crowdsourced these efforts to over 10,000 library users. It also has the potential to provide information on catalog usage habits, which I will be exploring more in the future. And finally, the identification of one catalog record can lead to a domino effect. For example, one issue identified recently was the usage of lowercase l's rather than the number 1 in the publication date field in vendor provided records, which hinders library users' abilities to limit their search by a publication date. And once this issue was recognized in one record, it was able to be quickly fixed in hundreds of records through a global update. So thank you for joining me today for this presentation, and feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you, presenters. We do not have an awful lot of time left, so we would encourage you to contact the speakers directly if you have further detailed questions. Megan, we do have a question for you. I think that I may have missed this. Did you say you were using self-hosted EZproxy prior to your migration? What are your thoughts on the turnaround time for OCLC to add edit stances in the hosted version versus the time it took to make similar changes in the self-hosted version?
So yes, we were self-hosted before we migrated over to the hosted. It can take, it depends. I think it can take a little bit longer because we would have, we had 2 people in our department who could make the changes, but if they were unavailable to make changes to our server, then we just had to wait until they were. And you can submit tickets to OCLC. I like to call if it's urgent and get someone on the phone for more immediate assistance. So it varies.
Thank you. Abigail also had a question, which she was kind enough to be answering herself in chat, but I don't think it was shared out to everybody in the room. Are the titles in question online serials, print serials, or both? Is it possible for you to share a sample report out to others? Sorry, Abigail, I know you've already answered this.
No worries. Yeah, so we just use we use our link resolver for databases and for only electronic serials. So we don't have any print. So it's always comparing to the electronic version of the electronic record in our Cersei Symphony ILS. And right now the report is behind a staff login. But if there was particular collections people were interested in, I could make, sorry, my cat is joining me. I could make that report available in a spreadsheet, and I could also talk with our IT department about potentially opening it up. But yeah, if there's a particular collection you're interested in, I could always share that information. I will just caveat it by the fact that, you know, we may have localized that particular collection in some ways, like we may have local portfolios or local coverage statements in there, so it might not exactly represent the data that you would have in your link resolver knowledge base for that particular collection.
Thank you. I have sort of a observation thing here. Nicole, very interesting and great slide template. I'd be interested to hear about your research on catalog use habits when you have completed it. Hope you'll submit a proposal to North Carolina Serials.
Of course.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions right now, other than there were some general questions about whether the slides would be available. And yes, they will be available, plus the recordings after the conference. We still have a few minutes here if anybody, oh, here we go. Yvonne, does the OA Switchboard work directly with the directory of open access journals at all?
Right, I saw the question. Thanks, Mandy.
Mhm.
Yes and no. We have a data field, which is, I believe, even a mandatory field, whether a journal is listed in the DOAJ, yes or no. At the moment, there is no real-time checking if the information put in by the publisher is correct, and that is something we're looking at into for the future. And on a personal level, yes, we're working with the DOAJ and other industry initiatives to learn from their experiences and how they, for instance, do their budgeting or how they do legal side of things. So yes and no.
Well, thank you. As a cataloger for the DOAJ, I'm very glad to hear that. Okay, as I said, I think we have time for one more question, if anybody has one that they would like to raise. Okay, in that case, we will call an end to the session. Oh, hold a minute, one more, no, remarks, more remarks. Okay, as a reminder, the session has been recorded and recordings and slides will be made available in coming weeks. If you have any more questions, please reach out to the speaker via email. Thank you everyone for attending the session and to the speakers for their great presentations. Yvonne, Megan, Abigail, and Nicole, I really appreciate, as do my fellow committee members, your contributions to our conference. Thank you very much.